This is BBC News. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. Our top stories. The search goes on for survivors of the Indonesian tsunami. 373 people are now confirmed dead, with more than 100 still missing.
Teams from the military and the search and rescue teams are here clearing away the rubble to make way for what will be a slow rebuilding process here.
There are fresh warnings another killer wave could hit coastal areas as the Anak Krakatoa volcano continues to seep. US market meltdown continues as President Trump launches a fresh attack on the Federal Reserve Bank. The American actor Kevin Spacey is charged with sexually assaulting a teenager 2 years ago. Hello and welcome to BBC News. Indonesia's disaster agency now says 373 people were killed by the tsunami that swept through Sunda Strait on Saturday. More than 1,400 people have been injured, 128 remain missing. Thousands of people who live on the islands of Java and Sumatra there have been forced to evacuate up to higher ground, and there are warnings that more eruptions at the Anak Krakatoa volcano could trigger more deadly waves. Rebecca Henschke reports.
Rescue workers clear away the rubble in a race to find any survivors. Today, in this villa, none have been found. Villas like this one, built right on the shore, didn't stand a chance when the huge waves hit. This, the state of the swimming pool and the villa now. Teams from the military and the search and rescue teams are here clearing away the rubble to make way for what will be a slow rebuilding process here. The tsunami hit this popular local tourist destination at night without warning. The National Disaster Agency admitting their tsunami detection buoy system has been broken since 2012. When President Joko Widodo visited to inspect the relief effort here, he faced some tough questions and vowed to do better.
We don't know yet for sure where the source of the tsunami was. It's still being checked. In the future, the relevant agencies will provide detection equipment, systems that can give a warning to everyone.
That comes too late for these families, here to find loved ones amongst the dead. Those identified taken away in ambulances. Others, like this man, are still searching.
We are not at peace. We just want him returned to us in some way. We are preparing ourselves to accept the worst.
The vocalist of the band 17 that was performing on stage when the tsunami hit is here to put his wife to rest. Posting this video on social media, he says, "We're traveling again together, my love." Authorities are warning it may not be over yet, telling people to keep away from the beaches due to fears that ongoing activity from the Anak Krakatoa volcano could trigger a new tsunami. Rebecca Henschke, BBC News, Tarita, Banten.
Next, US financial markets have closed down a further 2.8%, their worst Christmas Eve performance ever. The drop follows the worst week for the Dow Jones Industrial Average in a decade. Earlier on Monday, President Trump took to Twitter to blame the US Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, saying it does not have a feel for the market. He tweeted, "The Fed is like a powerful golfer who can't score because he has no touch." Well, I've been speaking to our business reporter, Samira Hussain, about why the president would be attacking the Federal Reserve.
This is a criticism that we have heard from the president many times before. We've been seeing that the stock market has been falling over the last several weeks, and the president really blames the Federal Reserve and their policy of raising interest rates as a big reason for these falls. Now remember, President Trump has invested a lot of political capital into how the stock market does. So remember, back in 2016, immediately after the presidential election, and in 2017, we saw a lot of record highs on U.S. markets. Well, in 2018, we have not been seeing the same thing. And a big part of what the president believes is the problem is, in fact, is at the Fed, which has been reflected in that tweet.
And if it is the Fed, or even if it isn't, what are the other possible reasons that we've seen this dip over the last week?
Well, in the case of what happened today, we saw a pretty significant plummet on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, down some 650 points, almost 3%. And that has to do with what happened over the weekend. We saw that the U.S. Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, in a bid to really try and calm the already jittery markets, put out a statement saying that he spoke to the 6 of the largest U.S. banks, and don't worry, they have plenty of cash on hand to shore up the U.S. economy if need be. The only trouble is that U.S. investors weren't worried about that at all. So all Mr. Mnuchin really ended up doing is perhaps injecting even more fear, because they weren't worried about that before, and now U.S. investors are left thinking, well, what is it that we don't know that Mr. Mnuchin does?
Well, that's the view from New York. With me is BBC reporter Kim Gittleton. So let's try and pick through this. How unusual is it for a sitting president to be so direct and so critical of what the Fed's doing?
So there's been a consensus for over 30 years, basically since Bill Clinton was president in 1992, that actually central bankers, they do better if they don't have any political interference. The idea was that in the past, under different presidents, they'd put pressure on America's central bank to keep rates low, because if interest rates are low, that usually helps boost economic activity, and every president wants to take credit for a good economy. However, sometimes if you keep rates too low for too long, that can lead prices to rise as everyone's spending their money. That means inflation can get out of control. So that often leads to a bad economic outcome. So that's why for nearly 3 decades we've seen that presidents have stayed away from what the Fed does. So in some ways it's not unprecedented. We saw that Mick Mulvaney, who's the incoming chief of staff for President Donald Trump, tried to say that, this is all part of what presidents have done over history. But in recent history, we've seen that actually most presidents don't do this sort of thing, and that's why investors are really worried.
Well, we can certainly say this president doesn't do the sort of things lots of other presidents have done and considered normal in the past. Let's look at some of the other things that could be affecting not only the markets, the economy generally. Let's have a look at the shutdown. Where are we on that?
Right, so I think this is the thing. President Donald Trump is actually kind of trying to distract most investors. He says, look at the Fed, they're raising interest rates. This is why these markets are tanking. But actually, there's a lot that's been weighing on investors' minds, including this shutdown, which doesn't look to be ending anytime soon. And I think it's really worrying to investors because this is the 3rd one we had in 2018, which suggests that Washington dysfunction isn't getting any better anytime soon. And I think that, combined with, fears about global growth, the impact of the U.S.-China trade war, and of course what will happen when and if Brexit does occur, are all certainly weighing on investors, and that's partially what's led to the sell-off.
And Kim, while I got you here, I want to look ahead to kind of where the US economy looks like it's going. Just before you do, just to say, Japan's share average falls below 20,000 mark. It's just coming in the last few minutes. For the first time since mid-September 2017, perhaps a marker of where we're looking at. But where do you think the US and the global economy goes in 2019?
I mean, that's typically what we've seen, right? U.S. markets fall, that leads to losses in Asia and then in Europe. And I think partially what we've been talking about is that 2019 seems to be the year that we're calling the reckoning. U.S. economic growth has been very strong for the past year, partially as a result of President Trump's tax cuts. But many investors aren't convinced that that can last for much longer, combined with the fact that we've seen a slowdown in terms of Chinese growth. And of course, Europe is a big concern. And tech regulation. Many of the stocks that have led to these record highs that we were talking about over the summer were companies like Google, companies like Facebook, that are now under increasing scrutiny from regulators. And many investors are worried that that could hurt their profitability going forward.
Kim, as if we haven't had enough to go through with 2018, 2019, and now you're telling me it's called the Year of the Reckoning.
Sorry, Merry Christmas.
That's terrifying, yeah, Happy Christmas. Anyway, Kim Gilson, thank you very much. OK, let's get a look at some of the day's other news now. A US judge has ruled that North Korea must pay $500 million in damages for torturing and killing the American student Otto Warmbier. He died last year, days after being released from a North Korean prison. He was arrested in January 2016 for stealing a propaganda sign. Pyongyang has always dismissed claims of torture. Israel is to hold a general election in April, 7 months before it's due. There's disagreement within Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition over a bill relating to ultra-Orthodox Jewish men serving in the military. The Prime Minister has only a one-seat majority in the Israeli parliament, and he's also under pressure over a series of corruption investigations. The body of a 7-year-old migrant girl who died after being detained by US border agents has been returned to Guatemala. Jacqueline Carl and her father were in a group of more than 160 migrants who handed themselves in to US border agents in New Mexico on December the 6th. She died less than 48 hours later. Mount Etna in Sicily has erupted, sending a huge column of ash into the sky and causing the closure of Catania Airport on the island's eastern coast. The volcano is Europe's largest and most active and can burst into action several times a year. There are no reports of any injuries. The American actor Kevin Spacey has been charged with sexually assaulting a teenager in 2016. The alleged victim is the son of a US television news anchor. Mr. Spacey has previously said he didn't remember the incident. Gary O'Donoghue has more.
These charges relate to an alleged incident back in 2016 in a bar in Nantucket. And Kevin Spacey is accused of plying an 18-year-old man there with drinks and then indecently assaulting him. There's also a battery charge. Now, there was no complaint made to the police at the time, but when allegations started to emerge against Mr. Spacey last year, this teenager with his mother, who's a local newsreader, came forward, made a complaint to police, and that's been proceeding ever since. If you remember, when the first allegations came out against Mr. Spacey, he apologized for what he'd done in a particular case and came out as gay and said part of his problems had resulted from the kind of way he tried to keep his life private. But there have been really about 24 separate allegations made against him. One case in Los Angeles was recently thrown out because of the statute of limitations. This really is the first case to come anywhere near court. Now, of course, he's been dropped from the hit Netflix drama House of Cards. He hasn't made any comment about this court hearing. We've tried to contact his lawyers without response. He has posted a rather bizarre video on YouTube where he assumes the character of Frank Underwood, the president, the evil president from House of Cards, talks to the camera in that sort of typical way that Frank Underwood does, and appears to address the viewer, not specifically about this case, but urges them not to believe anything without the evidence and without the facts. Of course, police in London as well are still investigating a number of allegations against him in connection with his time as artistic director at the Old Vic. Now, this arraignment hearing in New England will take place on the 7th of January.
Gary O'Donoghue in Washington. Here, the Queen will use her Christmas message on Tuesday to call for goodwill to all, in comments being seen as an appeal for unity in the debate over Brexit. In her televised address, she is expected to say that treating other people with respect, even where opinions differ, is a good step towards understanding one another. Well, do stay with us on BBC News. Still to come. The couple arrested over the drone chaos at Gatwick Airport, then released without charge, say they feel completely violated.
The world of music's been paying tribute to George Michael, who's died from suspected heart failure at the age of 53. He sold well over 100 million albums in a career spanning more than 3 decades.
The United States troops have been trying to overthrow the dictatorship of General Manuel Noriega. The Pentagon said that it's failed in its principal objective, to capture Noriega and take him to the United States to face drugs charges.
The hammer and sickle was hastily taken away. In its place, the Russian flag was hoisted over what is now no longer the Soviet Union, but the Commonwealth of Independent States.
Day broke slowly over Lockerbie, over the cockpit of Pan Am's Maid of the Seas, nose down in the soft earth. You could see what happens when a plane 8 stories high, a football pitch wide, falls from 30,000 feet.
Christmas has returned to Albania after a communist ban lasting more than 20 years. Thousands went to midnight mass in the town of Shkodra, where there were anti-communist riots 10 days ago.
This is BBC News, the latest headlines. The death toll in the Indonesian tsunami has risen to 373, with warnings another wave could hit any time. President Trump has blamed the Federal Reserve after another day of turmoil on the US financial markets. Now, the couple who were arrested on suspicion of causing the grounding of flights at Gatwick Airport last week have said they feel completely violated. Paul Gate and Elaine Kirk were released without charge after being linked to the operation of drones near the airfield. Today, they made a public statement criticising the way they've been treated by the police and newspapers. Richard Lister has more.
It was 3 days of chaos. 1,000 flights cancelled or diverted. The Christmas plans of 140,000 passengers spoilt by suspected illegal drone flights over Gatwick. Police made 2 arrests. Elaine Kirk and Paul Gate were eventually released without charge, cleared of any involvement. But they came home to find their names splashed across some of the Sunday papers, along with their photos, details of their private lives, and some critical commentary. Today, they responded.
As you can probably imagine, we're feeling completely violated. Our home has been searched and our privacy and identity completely exposed. Our names, photos and other personal information has been broadcast throughout the world. We are deeply distressed, as are our family and friends, and we are currently receiving medical care.
Their experience has raised concerns about the coverage.
Some parts of the press have dealt with this case appallingly. Following a recent change in the law, you're no longer able to name people who've been merely arrested before they've been charged. And even if you do, you're not allowed to vilify them in the way that these people have been vilified.
Sussex police confirmed they didn't release the names of those arrested. They're still investigating what they say were multiple confirmed sightings of drones. Life has now returned to normal at Gatwick, but not for the innocent family caught up in this inquiry. Richard Lister, BBC News.
At least 20 people have reportedly been killed in Kabul after reports of multiple explosions in the vicinity of 2 government ministries. The attack started with a suicide car bomb blast near the entrance. A gunman then stormed a building. Afghan security forces have now reportedly rescued more than 300 people held hostage by the militants. The BBC's Kabul editor, Shoaib Shafiri, gave us this update.
We know that after 7 hours of a gun battle, the area has been cleared off completely, and the attack that happened just before the home time for the civil servants in this government building, and as reported, 2 multiple explosions followed by gun battle. The Interior Ministry spokesperson said 7 people were involved in this attack. The first 3 detonated the explosives at the entrance gate, and then 4 others entered. The operation took 7 hours in room-by-room clearing up operation. It was a fully packed government building, a department for the disabled, and in the very first attack, as it happened, 200 employees were rescued from emergency exit, but 350 others. In fact, it took 7 hours until they were safely taken out of the building. During the attack, in fact, the people who were trapped, they had taken refuge into toilets, into basements, into corners, and 2 of those people who were caught there contacted me and said how terrified they were. In these buildings there were children, women, and some people who were customers of this department had referred that day. In fact, the attack shocked Kabul residents. In fact, after some few weeks of quiet, this happened right in the heart of the city, not very far from the presidential palace and Ministry of Defense. In fact, after quite some months, this is the first car bomb attack, because a few months ago the Interior Ministry introduced several layers of checkpoints and K9 sniffing dogs that sort of prevented big car bombs inside the inner circle of the city, but this one came as a big shock.
Latest on those explosions in Kabul there. Next, 2019 promises to be another roller coaster year for Brexit. The UK's departure from the European Union has divided opinion in Britain. MPs within the governing Tory party as well as opposition Labour can't agree on the way forward. But what do people outside the UK think? We talked to the foreign correspondents reporting on Brexit.
If Dante's Inferno was written again for today's audience, Dante would put Great Britain in a hell in which the country has to repeat debating Brexit forever.
There was a lot of shock and surprise to leave the European Union, but I think there was also a sort of assumption that Britain, as a very sophisticated, smart country, would navigate its way through this.
Some people think, has it happened yet? Good riddance, goodbye. Another stream is skepticism. They're never going to do it.
Real sadness. I think, of course, yeah, impatience and bemusement, and why is that all going on? Everybody loves Britain, they love Scotland, they love London, they love Cornwall, they see all these films about Cornwall, and Harry Potter, and Cambridge and Oxford.
There's some who welcomes Brexit and think that actually that UK should join the EEA, and that is great news. Like, now we get a new member to our club, and that will make us kind of stronger together. Some Norwegians will be scared that Norway would lose their voice within the EEA because UK is a bigger country.
There was a trio of big nations in Europe, Britain, France and Germany. Now it's left to France and Germany. France and Britain are the closest military and security partners. It will continue after Brexit.
I mean, so many Germans watch actually Prime Minister's question, and they are absolutely, they find it fantastic how they are shouting at each other, but in this such a educated, sophisticated way. That's why I think there is bemusement or even irritation about the fact that this very parliament is suddenly falling apart.
Nigel Farage obviously has some recognition because of his role in the Trump campaign, because he does some broadcasting in the US. Boris Johnson, I think, did establish some profile.
People are really aghast at what is happening here in the political circle and fighting like school children.
Italian politics is so chaotic. When they look at Brexit debates in Parliament, they don't consider it particularly, scary or crazy.
There's been a lot of talk about Ireland getting above its station. There's a sense sometimes amongst Irish people that maybe British politicians who say those kind of things simply don't understand Ireland.
I'm ready to bet nobody in Italy knows what the backstop is. They will probably say, I think it's a baseball position, or maybe a new tactic that you play in football.
People don't know how likely that hard border is. But you have to remember, this isn't just a practical thing, this is also a very emotive thing for people. There are generations on both sides of that border who have been scarred by the events that have happened within the last 20, 30, 40 years.
Americans' instinct, the UK, and they would like to have a close relationship.
Italians have such a love story with Britain. They want to be able to come to this country to visit as tourists. They want to study. The UK universities are full of Italian students. This love story will not end, of course, with Brexit. No matter what happens, Britain is part of Europe.
Now, Christians from across the world have attended midnight mass in Bethlehem in the West Bank. Crowds gathered for Christmas Eve at the Church of the Nativity, which is widely regarded as the place where Jesus Christ was born. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas was among those who attended. The biblical town has seen a boost in visitors this Christmas after unrest in recent years linked to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now, as you decided what to do for Christmas Day, I guess it would probably involve being around family or friends at this time of year. Well, not for Joe Doherty. He's a scout leader from Hampshire in England. Instead, he's spending his Christmas in one of the most remote places on Earth, on the Antarctic plateau. His journey will take him to the geographic South Pole, returning by kite ski to the Hercules Inlet, the southern tip of the ice shelf there. He hopes to ski to the South Pole and return under wind power. And I think there'll be lots of people around their Christmas tables on Christmas Day being quite jealous of him at some point. Anyway, don't forget, get in touch with me on Twitter. I'm @LVaughanJones. I'm Lewis Vaughan Jones, and this is BBC World News.
Hello there. Over the last few hours we've been watching temperatures drop like a stone. Yes, it's turning into a cold night with quite a widespread frost. Out to the west we've got a lot of cloud showing up on the satellite picture as well. With that, southerly winds dragging up quite a lot of moist air, bumping into that cold air over the UK is a good combination for some fog. And the Met Office have already issued a yellow weather warning for patches of fog within this yellow weather warning area that covers a good part of England. And with visibility dropping below 100 metres in places, the fog will bring some dangerous or hazardous driving conditions out and about on Christmas Day. So if you're planning a journey to visit friends or family, please leave a little bit of extra time and let's make sure everyone arrives safely. Now, aside from the fog, it's going to be a cold start, as I mentioned, a fairly widespread frost, lowest temperatures across eastern Scotland. In the north and west of Scotland, we've got a weak weather front bringing a little bit of rain for a time at Christmas Day, but that should tend to clear away. We'll be left with mainly cloudy skies across the west. Could be thick enough for an odd spit of light rain or drizzle just about anywhere, but it is a mainly dry day. Coldest across eastern areas after that colder start to the day. With a lot of cloud around, temperatures will be slow to rise, and indeed there could be some fog patches that linger all day. Into Boxing Day, we've got a weather front pushing into the northwest of the UK, bringing some rain to northern and western areas of Scotland. But away from that, with more cloud around, it shouldn't be quite as cold a start to the day on Boxing Day. Temperatures typically above freezing, 6, 7, 8 degrees Celsius for a number of us. But as we go through the day on Wednesday, Boxing Day, yeah, it's going to be another cloudy day. There's that rain then across the north and west of Scotland, with the breeze picking up here as we go through the afternoon. Further south, we may well see a few breaks in the cloud coming up into southern parts of England, so the skies might well brighten up here. It will be a mild day for most of us, temperatures typically around 10 or 11 degrees Celsius. Now we'll take a look ahead into Thursday, which is the day after Boxing Day, if you're struggling with your days. It's going to be another pretty cloudy day, and again there could be a bit of rain in Scotland, not amounting to too much, it has to be said. A greater chance of seeing some sunshine coming up in the south, but here we could start the day on a locally cold and frosty note, and those temperatures not quite as high, 7 or 8 degrees Celsius England and Wales fairly typically, still pretty mild there for Northern Ireland and Scotland. Now I have to say, I'll give you the forecast for the rest of the year, and for most of us it's going to stay pretty quiet, and that includes in the run-up to New Year's Day. That's your latest weather. Bye-bye.
The word historic is often overused. Today, it was justified.
Every ambulance we've seen so far has meant another life saved.
Honestly, down here on the long walk, we don't know which way to look.
What was tightly packed houses and shops all now reduced to rubble.
The rescue team has been at sea off the coast of Libya for 2 days, and in that time there have been 10 migrant boats in trouble.
It's not just the bombs and the bullets that civilians here have fled from. This war has shattered everything that kept people afloat.
Imran Khan promised to create a new Pakistan, but as Prime Minister he'll face real challenges.
It's one of those days where it does feel like history is being made.
The atmosphere here is absolutely incredible. These streets have been scenes of national grief. Now they're places of utter joy.
This is BBC News, the headlines. The death toll in the Indonesian tsunami has risen to 73, with more than 100 still missing. Rescue workers are continuing to search for people trapped in the wreckage amid fears that another big wave could hit. US financial markets have closed on the worst Christmas Eve trading day ever. President Trump has blamed the Federal Reserve for the state of the country's economy. Senior Democrats have launched a scathing attack on Mr. Trump, accusing him of plunging the country into chaos. And the American actor Kevin Spacey has been charged with sexually assaulting a teenager in 2016. The alleged victim is the son of a US television news anchor who first made the allegations last year. She said the actor had bought her son drinks in a bar in Boston before groping him. Now on BBC News, it's the year the social media giants came under fire. The printed press got smaller and blockbuster TV got even bigger. The BBC's Amal Rajan gives his take on the last 12 months in review 2018, the media year.
Hello and welcome to the Media Year 2018. In the next half an hour we're going to look at the intersection between technology and the media over the past 12 months, a golden age of TV and audio, and the increasing impact of data on all our lives. This has been the year of the techlash, a global backlash against Silicon Valley's biggest companies, prompted by controversies over privacy, misinformation, foreign interference, and much else besides. And one company has been in the spotlight and feeling the heat more than any other. Facebook's wobbles and worries morphed into constant woe. Revelations emerged about a British data firm, Cambridge Analytica, misusing data on a massive scale.
When the revelations first came to light, Hugh, the company aggressively said this was not a data breach. The truth is, it could have been something much, much worse. The mass harvesting of the personal data of tens of millions of people without them knowing about it.
In the UK, the Parliamentary Select Committee looking into fake news and misinformation has repeatedly called for Facebook's chief executive and chairman Mark Zuckerberg to appear in front of it. He's repeatedly declined, but he did turn up when summoned by US Congress. It was the interrogation he feared and had long resisted. Mark Zuckerberg has never testified before Congress. And now, with the eyes of the world on him, this moment in the spotlight promised high drama, and delivered it. In his prepared statement, Zuckerberg said this was on him.
We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a big mistake. And it was my mistake, and I'm sorry. I started Facebook, I run it, and I'm responsible for what happens here. The charge at his door that in building perhaps the most astonishing network in human history, he had created a mass surveillance tool that imperils us all.
If you and other social media companies do not get your act in order, none of us are going to have any privacy anymore.
Mr. Zuckerberg recognized the company made a huge error in not telling 87 million users that they had been targeted by Cambridge Analytica.
Why didn't you inform those 87 million?
We did take action. We took down the app, and we demanded that both the app developer and Cambridge Analytica delete and stop using any data that they had. They told us that they did this. In retrospect, it was clearly a mistake to believe them.
Next up, he accepted that he was wrong to describe the idea of Russian interference in the presidential election as crazy.
One of my greatest regrets in running the company is that we were slow in identifying the Russian information operations in 2016.
Intriguingly, Zuckerberg seemed to leave open the possibility of moving to a paid service at some point. But his core business model will always be based on our personal data.
There will always be a version of Facebook that is free.
Well, how do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service?
Senator, we run ads.
The extraordinary power of these companies stems above all from their ownership of data. Today, data is the most valuable commodity on Earth, and the richest companies own almost unimaginable quantities of it. Regulators across the world want to transfer power back from these companies and to consumers. This year in Europe we saw implementation of the most effective tool yet, General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR. How clear are you about what GDPR is?
I'm not at all.
GDPR? What is that?
GDPR, what is that exactly?
GDPR gives consumers much more control over their data. They can now expect to be told who their data has been shared with. They can opt out of profiling, and they can challenge automated decisions about issues such as whether or not they should be offered a loan. And beyond that, consumers can now demand free access to data about them held by a company within a month. Economic history is infinitely complex, but it does display clear patterns. The agrarian economy was based on land and the cultivation of crops. The Industrial Revolution created an economy driven by manufacturing. That in turn was followed by the growth of services and the knowledge economy, which places a premium on information. Capital today is shifting toward a new type of economy, one in which the most precious resource isn't something that we can touch, smell or hear. This is the data economy. Today the most powerful companies in the world are those who hoard almost unimaginable quantities of data. These companies are a new kind of media and technology giant, powered by algorithms that allow them to monetize information about all of us. The world is watching this European attempt to take back control of our data. The companies who hoard all this data have also had to contend with allegations about fake news and misinformation. But when Donald Trump uses the term fake news, he's generally talking about journalists that he just doesn't like very much.
CNN's fake news. I don't take questions. I don't take questions from CNN. CNN is fake news. I don't take questions from CNN. John Roberts of Fox. Let's go to a real network.
Of course, both Trump and the media have benefited from this mutual antagonism. But as I discovered when filming another report, a new emerging technology, facial manipulation, could soon make worries about fake news pale in comparison. The hit BBC drama Luther has been sold around the world. But the dubbing used for international versions rather removes the subtlety of the original.
I charged one and let the other one off.
Henry Madsen est sorti du coma.
Nicht so schön für Sie.
Hanno paura che mi avvicini furtivamente e finisca il lavoro.
Algorithms figuring out where is the eyes, where is the mouth.
In a rented space in North London, young entrepreneurs are using artificial intelligence to improve the viewing experience. Their software understands and rapidly models the intricacies of the face.
So I grew up in Denmark, which is a very small country, 5 million people, which means that we're too small for anyone to want to dock content. So I grew up on subtitles. And while I'm accustomed to subtitles today, it does take away a certain element of the experience.
Victor, how do we make sure that this technology is used for its commercial benefits rather than through its political dangers?
I think it's very important that you have good actors in this space that understand the technology, that can help shape it, both from sort of a public awareness perspective, but also very much in developing safety mechanisms to ensure that it's not used for bad.
Let me give you an example of how this AI technology can be used. So for instance, I might say, my name's Amal Rajan, I love reggae music, and my favourite band is The Wailers. But how about I say that again, in Vietnamese? Not a language I speak as it happens.
Tên tôi là Amol Rajan, tôi yêu thích nhạc reggae. Tôi thích nhất là band The Wailers. Tôi nghĩ họ là ban nhạc tuyệt vời nhất trong lịch sử.
But in the age of information overload, truth can be hard to find.
When you report fake news, which CNN does a lot, you are the enemy of the people. Go ahead.
The White House shared a video of Donald Trump's confrontation with a CNN reporter, which the network claimed had been modified. CNN say it had been manipulated by conspiracy theorists who support the president. What if concerns over fake news, such as these posts on Facebook, are but nothing compared to the potential harm from fake video?
People will not be able to trust the truth. They won't be able to tell what is real, what is not real. And in some cases, they may be faced with reports that are real, but they won't trust them.
A war for the truth is raging in our media today. And while this technology will make television better, it could make already fragile democracies much worse. Over at Google, a huge walkout among staff globally in response to the mishandling, as they saw it, of sexual harassment allegations shows the fight for gender equality is raging in the media, and not least at the BBC. Several of the most high-profile female presenters on BBC News went to Westminster to support their colleague, Carrie Gracie.
Do the BBC need to do more on equal pay for women? That's why we're here.
Look into the middle, everyone, please. I was appointed China editor at the end of 20.
She resigned her post as China editor in protest at unequal pay. In blistering testimony to a select committee of MPs, she accused the BBC of institutionalised discrimination when it had paid her less than other international editors.
We knew there was inequality. We didn't know the details because the BBC is extremely secretive on pay, but we knew we were underpaid, and I was determined at this point where I knew I'd give the China job every last ounce of my skill and stamina. I knew I would do that job at least as well as any man.
The corporations dealing with her grievance was, she said, insultingly shambolic, and she added that she'd be declining nearly £100,000 in back pay. Gracie's grilling went on for 2.5 hours. When said management emerged in the afternoon, the Director General apologised for the situation.
I'm sorry, it went to a grievance, and I said up front at the beginning I'd very much like to resolve the case of Carrie Gracie with her. And I'm sorry this has taken so long, and I'm sorry within this position, yes.
He went on to explain for the first time in public why the BBC believe there is a hierarchy of roles among correspondents.
The idea that every single editor, home and abroad I would imagine, should be paid exactly the same, I don't agree with. It should not be a matter of gender. Completely agree. Outrageous if it was. But you know, you have balances between different editors, and we need to be very upfront about what that, as it were, pecking order is.
The BBC has a clear plan and is largely ahead of the industry on gender equality. But many feel there's still a long way to go. The BBC battled on many fronts, not always successfully. Big existential challenges from cash-rich American rivals mixed with more local headaches. Sir Cliff Richard won his privacy case in response to the BBC's coverage of a police raid on his home.
We welcome today's judgment, and Sir Cliff would wholeheartedly like to thank everyone who supported him throughout, his family, friends, and of course his fans. It's meant a huge deal to him. Thank you very much.
I can't really answer too many questions at the moment. It's going to take a little while for me to get over the whole emotional factor, and so I hope you'll forgive me. I'll be some other time. Thank you very much.
The BBC is very sorry for the distress caused to Sir Cliff. We understand the very serious impact this has had on him. The judge has also made clear that even if there'd been no footage of the search and the story had less prominence, the very naming of Sir Cliff would have been unlawful. This creates a significant shift against press freedom. This means police investigations and searches of people's homes could go unreported and unscrutinised. It will put decision-making about naming individuals in the hands of the police over the public's right to know. We don't believe this is compatible with liberty and press freedoms.
The BBC eventually decided not to appeal. Now then, at this point in our review of the media year 2018, let's shift the focus from the producers of media to us, the consumers. This is a golden age in TV. In terms of scheduled TV alone, this year saw massive hits from Bake Off and Strictly to Bodyguard and of course the World Cup Unite the Nation. In the planet of box sets, there is now unprecedented choice. Over 10 million UK households now have access to subscription video on-demand services, and as a result, the distinction between film and TV is basically collapsing.
Are you okay?
What happened?
You fainted.
One of this summer's big budget released and streamed on Netflix. To All the Boys I've Loved Before is about a teenager whose secret love letters are taken by her little sister and sent out to the 5 boys that she has crushes on.
Look, I appreciate it, but it's never gonna happen.
I'm sorry, what?
It's created a buzz on social media. But here's the thing, no cinema is going to show it.
Oh my God. The letters are out.
Streaming services from the likes of Amazon and Apple first revolutionized TV. Now movies are getting the same treatment. And it's changing the economics of the industry. Franchises such as the Marvel film Ant-Man and the Wasp have dominated the list of top-grossing films in the last few years. They appeal to international and particularly Chinese audiences, who in precarious times are often vital to make productions viable.
The rise of the golden age of TV and the franchisation of film are connected. You'll have almost all the kinds of content that you want to see, except for the biggest superhero films. You'll be able to see everything else at home if that's what you prefer. But for those of us who love theaters, it might be a bit sad.
Front row, please, mate. As a result of this revolution, cinemas are changing. They're diversifying to become hubs for community events, from live conversation to meeting places for new mums. Box office sales are no longer the sole metric of success. In fact, so far this year, box office receipts are down while cinema admissions are up. And the Electric here in Birmingham, founded in 1909 and the oldest working cinema in the country, is at the forefront of this very modern trend.
I think if the smaller cinemas want to compete, they need to continue to reinvent themselves and come up with new ideas. And if that means pairing cinema with food or wine, it gives people a reason to leave their living rooms and head back into the cinema again.
In the age of the smartphone, competition is unprecedented. One former boss of BBC Films, who is now an independent producer, can see power shifting towards smaller television screens.
A lot of talented producers are probably feeling that film is less worth their while. I think they get to the point where it's exhausting and it often doesn't work, and they're seeing that many of the things that they enjoy about film are happening in television, and they want to be a part of that, and they can build a business on the back of that.
I'm cooperating, don't shoot!
The final episode of political drama Bodyguard was one of the TV stories of the year, peaking at over 11 million viewers and a 50% audience share. It also pulled in 1.3 million viewers between 16 and 34, those who have been fleeing traditional TV.
Each episode, people felt that they couldn't wait, that rather than catching up and being behind the conversation, they felt a pressure to watch live, and so the proportion of our audience watching live went up as the series went on, and I think that shows that there's still an appetite for appointment to view television.
For commercial channels who don't enjoy the privilege of the licence fee, standout shows like Bake Off and Love Island subsidise more risky and ambitious programming. The executive producer who turned Love Island into a BAFTA-winning sensation among young viewers says scheduled TV still has a future.
Young people want to watch TV, they want to watch good TV, and I think we shouldn't patronise them by thinking that they don't want to watch that kind of television. I think, a couple of years ago when Netflix came along, everyone panicked and thought, oh no, we can't compete, we can't do it, but you can. You make a great programme that's engaging, people are going to watch it.
I had nothing to do with Julia's assassination, nothing. I tried to save her.
For shows like Bodyguard, much of whose final episode was filmed here, tense plot lines that unfold in scheduled bursts rather than box sets can still appeal to a younger audience reared on smartphones. In fact, the gap between broadcasts can actually boost ratings, with days to generate huge buzz on social media and to heighten the anticipation. And there have been lots of big moves in the world of UK radio. On Radio 2, Chris Evans has announced he's moving from the breakfast slot to the same slot on Virgin. He's going to be replaced by Zoe Ball, and Sarah Cox is going to replace Simon Mayo and Joe Wiley in the drive time slot. On Radio 4, Eddie Mair has moved from PM in the afternoon to LBC, and all the while podcasts are changing the very nature of listening. Estimates suggest weekly listeners to podcasts in the UK have almost doubled in 5 years, from 3.2 million in 2013 to 5.9 million this year. The steepest growth is among young adults, with nearly 1 in 5 listening to podcasts each week.
So bright that we can clearly see the
Dark Side of the Moon. This is a classic.
Now the BBC is making a big play for this growth market. The BBC Sounds app is the biggest product launch from the corporation for a decade and combines live, local and national radio with music mixes, recommendations and podcasts. For advertisers, this new market is exciting.
Podcasts are a medium that's really redolent of trust. So once you've found your tribe on a podcast, you trust the podcast host, and that's a really valuable ingredient.
Something remarkable is stirring in the world of radio. A new generation is tuning in and turning up the volume. Now, in our review of the media year 2018, let's turn our attention to a massive global industry that's sometimes neglected by the news agenda. For a new generation of screen addicts, it's irresistible and sometimes dangerous. It's gaming.
You could be fighting dragons, or you could be taking out a terrorist force. Anything you want to do, save a princess from become a blue hedgehog running at the speed of sound. It's crazy.
Star Wars in gaming, and they put them into the one thing, and it's absolutely amazing how you can be any character. You can be a stormtrooper, you can be a rebel, and you can be absolutely anything and do whatever you want, and you can change your character.
From Angry Birds and Candy Crush to the latest craze, Fortnite, industry figures suggest over 37 million have played an electronic game in the past 6 months. Whether on PCs, consoles or mobiles, digital technology has made games widely accessible and generally cheap. And for some, it's not just a form of entertainment, but a lucrative career. By building a vast following on social media platforms, some gamers can make millions of pounds annually. On sites such as Twitch, hundreds of gamers live stream their experience, often while talking live to their followers.
I got some ideas in my head,
It's a digital universe largely beyond the view of many parents.
There's professional players out there now.
Under the pseudonym Tommy T999, Ross Thompson is building a brand and following. How do people make money these days out of gaming?
The basics are just kind of like the ad revenue that you will see from your videos or your content, and then you've got the likes of sponsorships, donations from kind of like the community, and then there's also opportunities to have deals with brands.
But for some, gaming can become a distraction and an addiction. Australian Neil Robertson became snooker world champion in 2010, but away from the green cloth, he immersed himself in gaming.
The thing is, you don't realise it's 12 or 14 hours, you know, it just goes like boom, blink of an eye. I was heavily addicted, I have no doubt about that. I denied it for many, many years, you know, saying that, oh yeah, I really need it when I travel away, it's so important. Whereas I wasn't sort of really confronting the real issue itself.
Now the World Health Organization has created a new classification. Gaming disorder for digital or video gaming now officially has 3 characteristics. Impaired control when gaming, prioritizing gaming over other interests and daily activities, and an escalation in gaming despite the negative consequences. To be diagnosed, such behavior needs to be of sufficient severity for at least a year. The gaming industry takes a different view. Joe Twist, the CEO of the game's trade body, said, "We're concerned to see gaming disorder still contained in the latest version of the classification, despite significant opposition from the medical and scientific community." New technology means millions of gamers are today immersing themselves in virtual worlds. Most do so without causing harm to themselves or others, but for a growing number, gaming is an addiction like any other. Concerns over the impact of new technology on our lives, from the effects of screen time on our minds to the polarising power of social media, has perhaps given some old media a new chance. Maybe newspapers and scheduled TV bulletins have life in them yet, even if some giants have bowed out. Paul Dacre left his perch as editor of the Daily Mail after a quarter of a century, prompting the paper to take a softer stance on Brexit. It was the end of an era.
I think I'll remember him as a great campaigning editor, someone who was in touch with his readers, someone who, as has often been said, understood Middle England.
I've always felt that Paul Dacre is the worst of British values posing as the best, and I think there's been a poisoning in our culture of which he's a very big part.
And it's been a momentous year for Rupert Murdoch. The media billionaire sold most of his US entertainment empire to Disney, and after a bidding war, the British and European broadcaster Sky was sold to another US giant, Comcast. Some industries are in terminal decline, however, local newspapers prime among them. A few weeks ago, I visited the West Midlands to talk to Keith Harrison, the editor of the Wolverhampton Express and Star, who's just left after 25 years.
Sorry, under the caravan section. Can I just say really fast?
Just a few decades ago, work in a local paper came with esteem, influence and a solid wage. Titles like the independently owned Express and Star in Wolverhampton were treasured in their communities. These days, their importance has grown further, but their commercial clout is diminishing. Now, if you want a second-hand car, you look online. And if you want local news, fewer and fewer turn to print.
It's challenging. I think if you look at the size of the audience compared to, say, 20 years ago, more people are reading our stories now than they were in that time. But that's if you take the print audience and the digital audience together. The difficulty we've got is that, of course, a large proportion of those people that are reading are no longer paying for the content. It's just the print audience that are, and it's how we start to monetize that digital segment.
The romance and nostalgia of local papers is at odds with the brutal reality of digital news. Now that we all have the equivalent of the printing presses in our pockets, classified ads have disappeared and aren't coming back. And what's more, it's hard for these guys to drive subscriptions. So while everyone agrees that local news matters, no one agrees on how to save it. And while these guys are up for a fight, they'll probably need some kind of subsidy. It may come from Silicon Valley. Facebook say they want to help train local reporters, just as the BBC now do. At a recent training camp in Cardiff, Google were teaching freelancers in the way of new digital tools.
What Google is trying to do is figure out how to partner with local newspapers to find the new digital business models, helping them find new advertising streams and making sure that we supply them with the technology that helps them generate that digital advertising.
The industry is on its knees and many blame Silicon Valley for stealing ad revenue and content. But if Silicon Valley retreated, it wouldn't bring local papers back. In November, the 250-year-old Johnston Press went into administration, triggered by an unmanageable debt of more than £200 million. A company run by the bondholders has been set up, and most jobs should be saved for now. The dame leading a review into the future of news is pragmatic about the local business model.
I think it's going to be very hard to revive it, because it depended so heavily on classified advertising, and indeed on other advertising. And of course, if you don't have the advertising, people have to pay more for their copies, and local newspapers tend to have much smaller circulations than national newspapers, so it's very hard to see how you rebuild the model in its present form.
The Cairn Cross Review will report back early in the new year, and we'll also hear more about government plans for new laws to tackle online harms. 2018 has been a riveting year in media, and 2019 promises to be even more so. Thanks for watching.
Hello there. Over the last few hours we've been watching temperatures drop like a stone. Yes, it's turning into a cold night with quite a widespread frost. Out to the west we've got a lot of cloud showing up on the satellite picture as well. With that, southerly winds dragging up quite a lot of moist air, bumping into that cold air over the UK is a good combination for some fog. And the Met Office have already issued a yellow weather warning for patches of fog within this yellow weather warning area that covers a good part of England. And with visibility dropping below 100 metres in places, the fog will bring some dangerous or hazardous driving conditions out and about on Christmas Day. So if you're planning a journey to visit friends or family, please leave a little bit of extra time and let's make sure everyone arrives safely. Now, aside from the fog, it's going to be a cold start, as I mentioned, a fairly widespread frost, lowest temperatures across eastern Scotland. In the north and west of Scotland, we've got a weak weather front bringing a little bit of rain for a time at Christmas Day, but that should tend to clear away. We'll be left with mainly cloudy skies across the west. Could be thick enough for an odd spit of light rain or drizzle just about anywhere, but it is a mainly dry day. Coldest across eastern areas after that colder start to the day. With a lot of cloud around, temperatures will be slow to rise, and indeed there could be some fog patches that linger all day. Into Boxing Day, we've got a weather front pushing into the northwest of the UK, bringing some rain to northern and western areas of Scotland. But away from that, with more cloud around, it shouldn't be quite as cold a start to the day on Boxing Day. Temperatures typically above freezing, 6, 7, 8 degrees Celsius for a number of us. But as we go through the day on Wednesday, Boxing Day, yeah, it's going to be another cloudy day. There's that rain then across the north and west of Scotland, with the breeze picking up here as we go through the afternoon. Further south, we may well see a few breaks in the cloud coming up into southern parts of England, so the skies might well brighten up here. It will be a mild day for most of us, temperatures typically around 10 or 11 degrees Celsius. Now we'll take a look ahead into Thursday, which is the day after Boxing Day, if you're struggling with your days. It's going to be another pretty cloudy day, and again there could be a bit of rain in Scotland, not amounting to too much, it has to be said. A greater chance of seeing some sunshine coming up in the south, but here we could start the day on a locally cold and frosty note, and those temperatures not quite as high, 7 or 8 degrees Celsius England and Wales fairly typically, still pretty mild there for Northern Ireland and Scotland. Now I have to say, give you the forecast for the rest of the year, and for most of us it's going to stay pretty quiet, and that includes in the run-up to New Year's Day. That's your latest weather. Bye-bye.
Welcome to BBC News. My name is Mike Embley. Our top